Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explains various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussion with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richardson. Today, with our guest, Paul, we are going to be talking about mercy in disguise. This is a cool caption. I'm just going to have to say mercy in disguise. Paul, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with me, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here, man.
So, what the heck do you mean mercy in disguise? Because I'm sure our listeners are wanting to know what that actually means.
So I chose this because it's also, or I should say, it was the title. And if anybody wants the audio for this, they can just message you, message me, whatever, and ask for the audio for it. I still have it. But it was the 40th episode of my first season of the podcast I hosted, Stepping into Freedom. The episode was called Mercy in Disguise. Um, and it's also the lyrics to one of my favorite songs. Um, by Laura Story. Um, I think it's called Blessings, actually. It says, "What if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise?" Talking to God, right?
Okay.
And I don't know how much of my story, if the Holy Ghost tells me today, yeah, we're going to talk more about this part of your life, then great. But a lot of that comes from my experience up in Canada, which is where the majority of the worst of my addiction took place, as well as most of the recovery. Um, and there's a lot of trauma associated with it, and lessons I learned from that we can get into today as well. But a lot, I kind of feel like, as the lyrics to one of my original songs goes, I feel like I've lived 10 lives in one.
Hmm.
And the next phrase is in covenant with God's holy son. So, yeah, that's kind of the background for why I chose that, if that makes any sense. But or do you want me to just kind of go, or do you have any
Yeah,
questions to
yeah,
get me
yeah.
started?
Just share with our listeners again what just the direction for the mercy in disguise.
So, okay, this is gonna maybe be similar to what I talked about then in my own podcast when I had that episode 40 for season one, but their details will be different because when I recorded that one, it was when my late wife Lorraine was still alive, and so yeah, a few things will be different, but that's fine. So my story starts when I was probably around 8, 7, 8, 9, somewhere around that. I don't remember exactly. I remember though that um, I had cousins that were visiting on their way from California to somewhere else. They were on a family vacation or something and said, "Hey, we can stop at their house." We know them, right? Stay there a night or whatever. And they brought their little camper with them. Like this was like 90s, early 90s, like one of those little tiny, like
Yeah,
one bed, barely room to sit campers, right?
yeah,
And just I'm assuming so that they could maybe take turns driving while the other one slept. I don't know. This was a new thing to me because I'm like they're from California. They're vacation people. They're by the beach. They've seen things I've never seen before. Us. My family and us mountain dwellers. My parents live 45 minutes, still live 45 minutes from the tallest flat top mountain in the world in Colorado. And so I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I wanted to go explore. I'm sure my mom was thinking, what's there to explore? Whatever, fine. It's just a little tiny thing, right?
yeah.
So I went inside, and my cousins, yeah, sure, I can show you the inside. We went in there, and I saw. Now, I know for a fact that no one had any ill intention here. It was just kind of an innocent kid thing that happened. Went inside this camper, and I saw it was like, like People magazine, and there's like Glamour magazine and things like that. There was nothing that was like anyone would say is advertised as pornography, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I had never seen stuff like that. My parents didn't have any magazine subscriptions. I think my dad had like a few at his clinic, but he made sure there was, tasteful stuff on his like his waiting room table. He's a doctor, and so in his clinic there was just stuff I didn't really care about. So, but I saw these magazines that were open in this trailer, and I saw some swimsuits that for the '90s, for me as a grew up in the mountains kid, I'm like, oh, that's bad, just kind of the way the swimsuits were designed and what you could see. And I'm like,
Yeah.
my cousin, no fault of his own. He's from California. He's used to seeing that stuff. It's not just, it's not something that shocks him because it's part of daily life. They're by the beach. So he goes, oh, what do you, it's no big deal. It's just a swimsuit. What are you talking about? And I'm like, my little 8-year-old wheels, my brain started turning. I'm like, wait, what? What does he mean by that, right? And you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
So I get curious. I'm like, what does he mean by this? And has he seen more than this? And my kid brain starts, as I get more towards, 9, 10, 11, tween age, right? I want to find out more. And now you have to understand, I lived in a small town where, and I don't know if this is just a Colorado, Utah, Idaho small town thing. I've been to other small towns where this it's not quite the same. But the town I grew up in, it wasn't just my house; it was the entire town. It's just this it had this very um, how do I say that? This air of almost like there are certain things we just don't talk about, right? We're all nervous about. We all have our small town paradigm of living, and if it's something that we're not comfortable talking about, just nobody talks about it. My parents thankfully were better off than most, and we had, the talk when I was a kid, the sex talk, and but what I'm finding out, and if you go on Google, you can even just Google, you don't even have to do Wikipedia, you can just search for studies that have been done about how one, the talk the anymore isn't enough, right? Kids need a space these days where they can feel comfortable, that their parents can create a situation, an environment where they feel comfortable. Hey, I'm curious about this, like, and they can have multiple talks, have conversations about it, right?
Hmm.
It's not this, weird, prissy, formal, one-time thing. Okay, we've done the talk. Parents, whew, that's over. It's like, no, 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 we need to do better than that, right?
Yeah.
And Delta, Colorado was one of those towns where you had the talk and the parents were relieved when it was over because it was awkward for them. And I'm like, in retrospect today, that's kind of what my parents grew up with themselves too, right? So I can't really blame them. Older generations, that's how the way it was in society. And our small town was very much like that. And so because I had this kind of ethos in my head of, you know, we don't talk about this, like we don't talk about Bruno kind of thing, right? From
Hmm.
that movie. And so I was afraid to talk about it a lot. And so what does a child brain who's afraid to talk about something want do when he wants to find out more information, but is scared to talk about it? He goes online.
Yeah. Yeah. They're curious. So that's one of the best ways of
Yeah,
looking
and
for it.
if they don't feel safe talking with parents, they go whoever else they feel safe, right? And I was bullied in school. So I couldn't go to friends because I'm like, oh, they're gonna think I'm bad too. And I actually just recently finished an English class at SUU where I wrote a paper, a research paper, one of those really like nitty gritty, like all the legit scholarly sources for everything about what happens to any human brain when you expose it to pornography, especially repeatedly. And it's destructive. It's very destructive, especially to a kid's brain. And I'm even going to say, if people want the research behind this, I'm happy to share it. If they want to message me, it is objectively destructive to the human brain. This is not just a religious thing or a moral, I've decided for myself. It has been proven as an objectively destructive thing, even softcore porn. So, through my teen years, struggled a lot on and off with it, tried to keep it secret like any teenager would do from parents who, have told you this is a bad thing. Um, and, I back then it was a lot harder to get it, even with like the very beginnings of the internet, there was, parental controls that came out after the first 10 or so years, people started realizing, oh, this is we need, some kind of rein in the bad content here. So parental control started coming out. My parents tried to use that. Kids will find a way around it, right? Back then, it was more a matter of my mom would go to the store. Hey, can I come with you? I like the skating magazines. Lie. Well, not entirely. I actually did like skate. I was into skateboarding for a while, and I actually did like that stuff too, but it was a lie. And, I'd try and kind of take a skateboarding magazine and put it behind the one I had in front of me. So when my
Yeah.
mom came by, I would just kind of shut them both and stick them back. That's what pornography does to your brain. It makes you realize, deep down in the psyche, people realize that what they're doing is wrong. Why else would they try to hide it? The dark web exists for a reason because it's a place where people can go and do really horrible, terrible things and get away with it for a time at least, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's how it works. You find clever ways like on YouTube. Oh, well, I'll just type in this kind of not so bad word so my conscience feels better in the moment. But I know that if I type this in, it's going to bring this up on the suggestions menu on the side, and then click here, and then they'll bring this up. And like you get really deviously creative, and it's disturbing how the brain responds to this.
Yeah. And I
Um,
want to pause you just for a second too, Paula, because everything that you just explained, so our listeners know, and those who watch the show quite a bit, I'm pretty sure they've heard me say this. It doesn't matter what the addiction is, the brain functions the exact same way.
exactly.
So what you are describing is the same type of thing that somebody who's addicted to drugs or alcohol or gambling or eating, it's that same type of, I can't even think of the
So
word.
it's a huge web of lies and
It
deception
is
that
a huge web of lies.
you're
Yeah.
lying to yourself. What you're doing is you're
Yeah.
lying to yourself.
Yep.
And I feel like the spirit's telling me, no, 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 don't say that in detail. But there are things I have heard, read about from very reliable sources that I won't get into right now because I feel like the spirit's saying, no, no, let's not go there right now. But that have proven to me that even on a spiritual level, um, spirits and beings we cannot see, there are things that they can do when we indulge in addiction and lies that spiritually um, open us wide up to some really scary levels of dark influence in our minds that when you're in the heat of the addiction, in the moment of your, ecstasy, if you want to call it that, there are things happening that would terrify the average person. And like I've actually seen what I'm the specific thing I wish I could say more about, um, drive some people to extreme depression, anxiety, suicide, things like that. So I won't discuss it here. Um, but it's a really big, dark web of lies. No matter, people say, "Oh well, maybe it is a lie, but it's just hurting me." I'm gonna give your listeners this. Go watch the docu-series. It's 3 videos, half an hour long, or no, 45 minutes roughly. It's called Brain Heart World. And in this documentary, it's by Fight the New Drug, which is a nonprofit, non-legislative, non-religious, um, basically educating people about the dangers of pornography and sex trafficking. Brain Heart World will give you mountains upon mountains of evidence that talks about why the pornography industry is not just its own thing. You're not just hurting yourself. There is no way to guarantee that what you're seeing sometime down the road, or if you make pornography and you're that really dark into it, you have no way of guaranteeing A, that it's consensual. There's no way to guarantee that. Manipulation happens all the time. There's no way to guarantee that it will not be used sometime down the road to groom a child, to blackmail someone else. Um, there's so many ways that, I mean, it's not, the way they put it in these docu-series is there's not pornography over here and prostitution over here and trafficking over here. No, 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 no. They're symbiotic. They're all
Hmm.
connected. A lot of the businessmen in these industries don't differentiate ethically or legally between the branches. To them, it's all money.
Yeah.
So little did I know I was just being a victim of all that. I was able to get clean long enough to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Went to Canada for a couple years. Came back, and I'll keep this next part kind of short, but it's a long, long, long story. But my late wife Lorraine, we had met on my mission when there was like less than nothing between us. She couldn't stand me, and she was 15 years older than me. But when the Spirit makes something happen, it happens. We talked a lot on the phone. We became really good friends, and more than that, I moved back up to Canada, and I think I can almost feel her in my head saying, "Wow, this is going to be the shortest version you've ever told of this part." Went up there. We got married in 2009, and her health problems. This is where the real hell begins. As if my teenage years weren't bad enough with the addiction stuff. Her health problems. She was born, and I feel like this is an appropriate time to share a lot of this stuff. What's coming next here? Lorraine was born with cerebral palsy, clubbed feet, spina bifida, broken hip, and we found out later in her life that she had a Chiari type 2 malformation at C3 in her neck, kind of from C2 to C4-ish, but um, which was kind of like later in life started like this deformation started like pinching off the nerves that help control the diaphragm, which contributed to breathing problems, etc. Just kind of cascading
Yeah.
effects. She was born to, and I won't say names here, but she was born to a scared and therefore abusive and neglectful mom who she was taken from. Um, she was charged for gross child abuse and neglect, was put in a couple foster homes. And I promise this comes back because of how it affected me later on with her PTSD. Um, but the background is really important here. She went to the second foster home was the only 2 years of her life where she actually saw firsthand by example what real love looked like before she met me. Um, actually, because it was a good experience for her. The Glance. I forget his first name, but Linda, and why do I not remember her foster dad's first name? Mark and Linda Gallant. Great people. She was in their home for a couple of years. And then she was adopted into a home that was exponentially worse than anything her birth mother dealt. Um, Instead of neglect, it was the other way around. Um, this mom, I don't know if modern, immortals would say she deserves that title. Um, but yeah, my late wife was in that home from about four, I think it was four, no, 6, when she was 6, until she left home. Um, Abused in every way you can imagine: physical, emotional, verbal, financial, sexual, spiritual, any kind of abuse you can imagine it happened at the hands of her adoptive mom. I'm not going to mention names because if that gets out, she's going to find someone to come after me for that because she'll deny it till this day, but not my business anymore. Um, so a lot of physical trauma there. Um, she had learned to walk despite all of her birth problems when she was about 4. But through her teenage years, the reason she had moved out was because her mom had basically, before she left somewhere, she was really angry about something, held a cast iron frying pan to her head and, threatened to kill her. Um, and something like that, it's like, and some people, are you sure? It's like, how does a teenager forget something like that or remember that kind of thing wrong? Like, how do you remember that kind of event wrong, right? So she's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna die, I better move out. So she moved out. Several years later, she was going to Mohawk College, but they had kicked her out for health reasons. Like she was disinvited back to school. She had just lost her job. This was in 1994, by the way, when this particular part was happening. and her boyfriend had just left her. Family wanted nothing to do with her. She lost everything. Offered the most sincere prayer. She told me this was the most sincere prayer I ever offered in my life. She told me that it was basically, okay, God, what do you want me to do now? I've got nothing. I have no education. I have no friends. I have no job. I have no one who cares about me. I'm on my own completely. I'll do whatever it is you want me to do. I don't care how crazy it is, but you've got to make it really obvious. So 2 days later, or maybe I should tell the other part. The next day, Jehovah's Witnesses came to her door. They were nice. She said she didn't feel anything with them, but okay, I'll listen for a bit. Didn't feel much. They left, and okay, great, whatever. Next day, three missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints came to her door, and the second she opened the door, it was like waterworks. She's like, I couldn't stop crying. The Spirit just walloped me. This is it. Do it. God said, okay, I'm making it obvious. So, um,
And let me guess, you happen to be one of those missionaries?
oh no, no, no,
Oh,
no. I
okay.
came in. I came into the picture much later.
All
I came
right.
into the picture much later. Which now again, if I hadn't said she's 15 years older than me, you could do the math when I said that was the same year I was baptized at 8 years old.
Okay. All right.
So, a lot of the trauma that she had dealt with at home, unfortunately, because of just, you know, kind of habits that develop when you have a past of trauma. When she joined the church, a lot of different traumas surfaced, a lot of gossip, a lot of blackmail, a lot of social abuse, um, even from people in the church. And the reason she stayed was because of other missionaries, right, helping her
Mhm.
out. I came into the picture again when I was serving in there as a missionary um, in 2006 to 2008. I was actually there in '07, where she was at. And so that's how we met. But when I went after my mission, I'm going to skip forward here because that's just, her background is important to this. Um, when I went back up to Canada, the health problems she had already been dealing with for most of her life just started getting exponentially worse. And the healthcare system up there, I won't say much about this, but Al, it's awful. It's great if like people say, "Oh, it's free, so it must be great." It's like it's great if all you ever need is like, oh, I'm gonna get my weekly checkup, or we're gonna have a baby, or if you're healthy, it's great. If all you ever need is just the common stuff. If you are chronically ill, it's just a slower and more painful way to die. And medical negligence is what actually killed Lorraine. In fact, her infectious disease specialist, who knew us very well by the end, by the time Lorraine died, came down the day she died and said to me word for word, "You know why this really happened, right?" I'm like, "I can think of several reasons why this happened. What's yours?" She goes, "It's because they waited too long to treat the kidney stones. That's why the infection happened."
Hmm.
I'm like, I could have told you that. I knew that. It's like, she goes, she didn't outrightly say it, but I knew she was thinking medical negligence. That's what caused it. Um, so with the trauma that happened for all those 10 years with her health problems, my trauma, um, I'm on the autism spectrum. I have an addictive personality in the first place, which is why you have, is this just audio or
It's audio and video.
a video? Well, I'm going to turn this around real quick, if I may. That's
Okay.
why I do this kind of thing. You
Ah,
know,
yes. Oh, your
writing music.
music.
Yeah, I'm a music nerd. My addictive personality helps a lot with, dedication to the craft of writing music. Um, but when it comes to my problems with Lorraine up in Canada, it was just, you know, just putting, gas on the flame with every problem that came up. And over time, we even had a bishop, more than one bishop, tell us, and these are people who have seen a lot in their lives. Bishops in our church, they hear and see a lot of crazy stuff.
Hmm.
And all the bishops we had up there, um, or most of them for those 10 years, had said to us, when we were going into their office and things, at one point or another, they all said something like, I have never, in all of my crazy experiences, seen any situation, any marriage as impossibly complicated and just crazy as yours. Like nowhere. Like um one bishop even like this guy had toured around the world, seen some really crazy things. He'd been to London, he'd been I think he's been to Africa once, South America, I think. He's been all over the place and he goes, I've never seen a marriage this complicated. He's like, I don't know what to do. Like I can keep, paying for helping pay for therapy, counseling. I can, help provide you, whatever I can personally, or the church is, is able to, financially speaking. But it was kind of just problems that finances couldn't fix,
So,
you know?
so Paul, just to pause you just for a second. So when you're saying complicated, basically it was all your wife's health issues
Yep.
was one issue, and then of course with the stress and everything that you were under that, that was also compounding your addiction at the same time,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah. Because you have
combining
this
these
rest. Yeah.
two.
Yeah. You have the rest
Yeah.
of her problems plus my past, which we didn't know at the time. There was a lot of trauma involved in my childhood, which yeah, growing up, I wouldn't have called it trauma. If anybody would have asked me, generally speaking, hey, are you happy with your parents and your family in your life? I would have said, oh yeah, everything's great. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, don't get me wrong, my parents are fantastic. I even took a survey in the year of college I did before my mission, where this girl was majoring. I think she was majoring or minoring in like psychology or family relations or something, and she had me take this survey, and I'm like, oh, the results. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. She goes, what do you mean it doesn't seem right? Your family is actually remarkably normal for this world, right? Like, societally speaking, right? And she
Mhm.
was right. Like, we had a generally pretty good childhood, but there were things wrong that only today, do we all of us look back and, oh, yeah, yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my trauma that, had been locked up and unaddressed for years, plus her trauma, which feeds back into mine, which feeds back into hers. And it's like, it's a cascading effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And neither of us, like, no matter in Canada, if you can't afford insurance, like I couldn't work. And that's an important factor. I should have mentioned that earlier. I couldn't work because for Lorraine, it was like her health problems were so bad, her doctor actually had to write a note to ODSP, which is disability up there, saying, you are not allowed, I'm the doctor, you cannot ask him to find full time work. Her life literally depends on him being there all day, every day. Is that your bell or mine?
No bell on this side.
Okay. Um, they're gonna have to wait. Um, and so like because of this problem, right? Um, it was just I'm forgetting where I was.
So you're talking about when you went in and you saw a lot of the bishops, they all kind of was
Oh
saying
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
same thing,
So
that no
like
one could
our
help
problem was
you.
just impossibly complicated. No amount of funds or service projects. I'm sorry. Can you hold on 1 second?
Okay. Well, yes. As he went to go check the door, this is kind of an interesting, definitely an interesting story, interesting show, and curious to see where it ends up because I just couldn't imagine going through all the foster things and everything too, and then having your life turned upside down too with a spouse that is struggling on either
Sorry
end.
about that.
No, no worries, no worries.
This is the first time that's ever happened. Someone comes to my door with cash and he's like, a Google Maps store or something. I'm like, oh my gosh.
All
Someone saw
righty.
my studio listing online and they're like, they have got cash in their hand. I'm like, this isn't a store, sir. Look on Google Maps better. I work out of my home. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, our cut and clip whatever you need to when you have to edit or whatever. But um, so yeah, it was just kind of the situation where nothing anybody could do financially, physically, emotionally, socially was actually going to solve anything. Because you can't, you have to be like a millionaire in order to be able to afford the kind of care Lorraine would have needed to get everything solved. In fact, one bishop had tried something like that, and tried, like, there's this place in the States, I forget what it's called, Advanced Medical. Maybe that was, yeah, I think it's called Advanced Medical. It's this kind of doctors who specifically look for and treat really crazy, complicated situations that no one's ever seen before. And, this bishop's like, oh my gosh, she would qualify in an instant, right? But because we couldn't get there for a physical consultation across the border, they wouldn't even consider it. There's no way to do that. So, yeah, crazy situation. And this is where it starts to come into mercies in disguise. This is, I think your listeners are going to like this part.
Okay.
Um, anyone who's read, and I'm going to give a plug here for this, anyone who's read the Book of Mormon, who has read the story of Alma the Younger, knows what I'm talking about when I say this. When he said, when he repented of his sins and said, the very thought of coming into the presence of my God did rack my soul with inexpressible horror. The darkness he saw, and then coming out of that to the light side. He says, as my joy was as exceeding as was my pain, right? And I read that after a lot of the experiences in Canada, and I thought, Alma, I can kind of relate now. Maybe not on the same scale. I wasn't knocked out for 3 days straight, but um, the idea that when God allows something horrific, or even multiple somethings to happen horrifically in your life, if you meet it with faith that he knows what he's doing, and you dig in deeper, like, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he didn't shake his fist at his father and protest and say, how dare you make me do this? No, he prayed harder. He reached out more. He didn't get angry or upset. And the more I found that I at least tried to lean that way instead, the spiritual experiences that came as a result of at least trying, despite not being able to beat the addiction on my own, which no one can if you're that deep into it. You need the Savior's help. But the more I leaned into him harder, it's like racquetball. The harder you hit that ball off the wall, the harder it's going to bounce back. You reach out for the Savior that intensely, you're going to get some help back. And the things that Lorraine saw as a result of those reaching out, and the things that I felt that I knew was happening in very sacred experiences, in our apartment over time, the light we felt as compensation, for those dark moments, more than compensated, and gave us more than enough strength we needed to keep going anyways, even though they weren't, the solution. Oh, this great spiritual experience and it's all solved. No, that wasn't what it was for us. So if anybody out there ever is, well, I tried it and it didn't solve it. Yeah, it didn't for me either. But it wasn't designed to solve it. It was designed to change who I was, so that, um, as one podcast guest on my show told me, and I love the way he put this. So if Jackson Jex, if you hear this, I'm still talking to, yes, I'm still talking about your episode to people these years later. He and his wife had gone through a miscarriage, and several months, if I remember correctly, after it had happened, they were just kind of, they felt, okay, we're going to try our best. We're going to get through this. We're going to have faith. Several months later, he had realized, the pain isn't getting any easier to handle. But he said, I realized that, and this is what happened with me too. He said, I realized that we were still carrying it. It wasn't destroying us. It was hard. It hurt a lot, but we were still going to church. We were still keeping our faith. We were still, actively being participants in discipleship to the Savior. And he goes, it wasn't getting any easier, but we realized that we were carrying it. We were at least able to, because we were, we were doing it. It was hard, but we did it. And that's kind of what the Lord was showing me was, okay, I'm going to give you what you need to get you by for long enough. And he knows what long enough is.
Mm-hmm.
And so these experiences were these massive bursts of light would happen for Lorraine and I really what we realized what was that these conditioning experiences and these just horrific situations where multiple times I thought she was maybe gonna die. And I stopped thinking that after a while, after like, I don't know, 7 or 8 times, doctor, I don't know if she's going to make it through the night. And she made it. And I'm like, after that, I started saying to doctors, you don't know her. She's going to make it. And most of the time, and of course, every time but the last time she did. Um, and that's why I say it's mercy, because those experiences that condition you, that necessitate those bursts of light to compensate, really are a mercy in disguise. Because what it's doing, it's I mean, you're a is the term gym rat colloquially appropriate? Like,
I'm there quite a bit, but not as much as some.
okay, I was like, I don't know. I've never been one of those people, so I'm like, is gym rat derogative? I don't like derogatory. I don't know. Like, can I use that term?
Sure, go for it.
So like, of all people, you understand what it takes to build muscle, what it takes to get fit, right? One nurse told me up in Canada, she goes, one of the reasons why Lorraine's legs and her bones are deteriorating is because she can't stand on them. Your bones, I don't know if anybody knows this out there, but your bones actually, if you don't walk for periods of time, your bones, just for the sheer lack of use, if you don't have the opposition, your bones won't develop. They won't stay strong. Like it's more than just good diet. You have to walk and put pressure on your bones in order for them to not just waste away slowly over time. And that's what was happening with Lorraine. And it's the same with the human heart and your soul. It's like, maybe the best way to put it is the sailboat analogy my seminary teacher used growing up. When you're out on a boat, if you have no wind, you are not going anywhere in your sailboat. You're just going to sit there and you're going to be stagnant and you're going to think everything's nice and wonderful, but you're just not becoming anything, you know? Ignorance is not bliss. Um, and so with no wind, you're not going anywhere. But if you have too much wind, yeah, you're going to topple over, right? You have to have that perfect balance of force without knocking you over. And the more, the tighter you can hold your sail with the stronger wind, the faster you're going to go, right?
Mhm.
Another one is with Elder David A. Bednar, one of the apostles in our church, right? There's this talk where he talked about a guy who was going to fetch wood for a fire, goes out in the snow in the middle of winter, fills his truck up partially with this bunch of wood he's chopping. Tries to make sure, wait a minute, I better make sure I can get out of here. Tries to start his truck up, and the wheels are just spinning. He's miles from anywhere. Doesn't have a phone with him. I might be missing some details of the story here, but for whatever reason, he couldn't go for help. Right? He couldn't call anyone. He was stuck. He was just stuck, which can be scary if you're out in the cold alone. So he goes, well, maybe a miracle will happen. Prayed about it, made a miracle happen. He thought, filled up the rest of his truck, and only with the increased weight of the wood in his truck did he have enough torque and traction to get out. The weight is what saved him from freezing to death. And if you push forward the way I tried to, with the weight on you, it's going to do more good for your soul than you have any idea. And that's why it was a mercy for me, was because I realized that pushing forward while under the weight, being the better person despite what was happening to me, despite what other people may or may not have been doing or saying to hurt us or ignore us or whatever it was, medical professionals, friends, whatever. You push forward with a good attitude while under the weight, take it to God, you're going to be stronger than you ever thought. You ever seen X-Men First Class? No, sorry. It's X-Men Days of Future Past.
Mhm.
There's a scene like they have to basically shortened version. They have to send Logan Wolverine back in time into a consciousness into his self 30 years previous or something like that, and talk to younger Charles to change time to save the day kind of thing, right? And younger Charles is just broken. His heart is, I can't do this, right? So he goes into the Wolverine's mind to look into the future, talks to himself in the future, his older self, and he's like, there's so much pain, I can't do this. There's like all the pain. He goes, it's not their pain you're afraid of, it's your own. He goes, if you let yourself feel it, embrace it, it will make you stronger than you could have ever imagined. He goes, and it's born from the most human part of us, hope, right? That human part, hope. He goes, if you can do that, it's the greatest gift we have to bear their pain without breaking. If you can bear other people's pain and your own, or whatever pain God asks you to bear without breaking, that is what makes you the person that can't be beaten by anything.
I with you saying telling that story, let's going back to being the gym rat. It's that same type of concept, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. You have to do something a number of times to get better at it, right? When
As
you
a
first started
pianist,
playing
yeah.
Yeah, when you first started playing piano, you didn't make the type of music you're making now when you first started. I mean, it just doesn't happen. It's even like when I decided to get back into the gym again and start getting back into shape by letting myself go for so many years. It was so hard for me to bear because I used to be able to bench like 250, 260 pounds, and I only had two 25-pound weights on each side. We're talking 50 pounds of plates plus the bar's 45. So, I'm not even talking really 100 pounds here. I'm only talking 95 pounds. And I remember shaking as I was trying to lift it. And it was that way for months, for months. However, having the resiliency to keep pushing forward, to keep going back no matter you have no clue, Paul, how
Yeah,
many
you,
times
you
I woke
can't
up
you
in the
can't let
morning.
anything stop you. If you
No.
know that it's like people don't realize the 10,000 hour rule at minimum is correct. I've been playing piano for 30 years, and now for my senior recital at SUU, I'm going to be playing probably one of the five most difficult pieces ever written. Beethoven's Waldstein is freaking hard.
Mm,
It's
I can
25 minutes long,
imagine.
and I'm supposed to have it and every other song I'm playing memorized. It's a hard piece. It's like up there with La Campanella for all you pianists out there. It's difficult, but it's because I wasn't going to quit. Um, Once I figured out, there's this time when I was growing up, and I told my mom, I was like, oh, I can't learn this, Mom. I just can't learn this. This is too hard. She goes, well, I'm paying for it. You're doing it. And I am so glad she did because like now I can advertise on my when I advertise for my business. Um, you know, I can tell people there's really almost nothing I can't learn on my own. I don't need a teacher anymore. I mean, teachers help, yes, and I'm glad I had 10 years of lessons, which really is the only reason I got as good as I did because in-person lessons make a massive difference. You need an ally on your side when you're overcoming addiction. You trust me, you need an ally. Um, so it applies to that too. But it's you have to be so committed to it. How did Jeffrey R. Holland say it? He goes, and I might be paraphrasing this, but he said, real change and repentance, even the big ones, can happen for you as instantaneously as it did for Alma and the Sons of Mosiah. This massive, huge, instant change. Well, nobody can overcome addiction just like that. Well, man, no, not everybody can. But he said that what Elder Holland was saying was that, instantaneous change can happen for you as instantly as that. And it only takes as long for you as it takes to say, I'll change and mean it and prove it. One of the reasons we're sent here, right? One of the reasons God sent us to this earth was to prove us, right? The scriptures say, we will prove them now herewith to see if they will do whatsoever things the Lord their God shall command them, right? Proven against what? It's not proof if it's not against something, you know? How do prove that something catches on fire? You try and light it on fire, right? If it doesn't light, oh, okay, that's not flammable. Then you've proven it.
Yeah.
Proof has to be against something. And there's a guy in my high school who wrote in the yearbook once who said, the problem, not really a problem, but the idea is clear. The problem with being good, he said, is that you have to prove it. It's not just something you go, oh, I'm a good person. Um, Sorry, all these things are coming to my head. Jordan Peterson from The Blaze, I think it is, said, being harmless because you can't do any wrong isn't virtue. Being harmless because you can do wrong, but you know how to control it. and you know when to step in and protect someone, and you know when to step in and speak up for the little guy, and when to let it go. That is what makes you a virtuous person, is being capable of great harm, but knowing when to use it. That's why they teach it in martial arts, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I took
Um,
martial arts just a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's not a matter of, oh, well, I'm innocent. I haven't done anything wrong with my life, and I just live like I'm a good person. I've never had any problems, but I've never caused them either, so I'm a good person. What do you want, a cookie? Whoop-de-doo, you know? And I know it might be offensive to someone. I apologize for that if it is, but it's like virtue comes from having been proven against something, not just having had an easy life.
Yeah.
And mercy in disguise is when you realize, oh, all these tough times I've been going through, I've turned to Christ, I've seen the fruits of it, I've seen the rewards, I'm a better person from that now. That is its own reward.
Well,
No,
and even with you even saying that too, Paul, mercy in disguise, a lot of times we'll go through a ton of stuff to even get ourselves back to that, to closer to God. Because
yeah,
I say that from experience on my own end. Because I mean, I've gone back and looked at the past 15 years of where my life's taken me, and it's definitely brought me a lot closer than where I was 15 years ago. And it was because of like what you're saying, all the stuff that I've gone through. I had lots of rocks and boulders and logs on my trail that I had to figure out how to either go around or go over or under, whichever way to get to where I needed to
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. And so, it's what's those memes I see on Facebook sometimes where it's like my plan and it has a little like line, going across like this nice smooth hike upwards, and there's a flag, and then there's the God's plan up and over and under and around and through this trap and over that. It's like,
Yep.
how else are you going to be proven? Um, and people, well, why can't I can imagine some people out there asking, well, why isn't just being good and not causing any problems? Why isn't that enough? Um, and I think the mistake in that thinking is that, um, just because you haven't been proven against something doesn't mean, well, that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Well, no, it doesn't. But not being bad isn't enough in today's world, as we can clearly see if you watch the news. There's the primary song in our church where it says, we live in a world where people are confused. If you don't believe it, go and watch the news. I promise you, one day something is going to come up where no matter how comfortable or, just private of a life you try to live, something is going to come up for you in our modern world, I promise, where your integrity is going to be tested. And whether or not you pass is going to determine the kind of person you have chosen to become. And that doesn't mean, like, there's one elder I knew who I was told prayed for trials. I'm not asking you to don't pray for I'm not. You don't have to pray for bad things to happen. Oh, I need to be proven. Now let's go seek out the bad. No, don't do that.
Life is going to give it to you either way.
But it's like my dad used to tell me all the time when I was in scouting. I'm an Eagle Scout, and he used to tell me, expect the best, but be ready for the worst. Because at some point in your life, you're going to see the worst of someone, somewhere. Be ready for it. Don't expect it, don't go looking for it, but be ready for it. And, when you push forward with Christ as your partner, um, and you do everything it takes to have him by your side, no matter what happens to you, it's also going to be happening for you.
For you. Yeah. That's why
My
they
my
say
sis,
life
yeah,
isn't happening to you, life is
yeah,
happening for you.
yeah. My sister-in-law Adele. The first time I heard that was from her. I'm like, ooh, I like it because it's true. Every experience you have is essential for your salvation. All of it, whether you realize it or not. Well, oh well, this horrible thing happened. I had nothing to do with it. How is this essential? Well, it's meant to train you how to respond better to that kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Actually, it is. It is training you.
So
Yeah.
that's and my where I came out of it. I'll kind of wrap it up here. Um, the biggest mercy in disguise for me, and I'll kind of wrap this up with a kind of a Christmas thing, I guess. um, when Lorraine passed, it was 2 months exactly, October 25th, 2 months before Christmas in 2019, and I remember I was still trying to, part of me was like, did I do the right thing? Did I'm like totally cutting off life support when everyone was saying, like I had promised her, she had made me promise to keep her alive at all costs, even if it was just artificial or painful or whatever else. She goes, I value life more than anything else. Like God says the life is valuable. Fine. I don't care how much suffering I have to go through. God says life is valuable. Preserve my life at all costs. And someone asked me, did you ever ask God if he was okay with you making that promise to her? I'm like, oh, no, no, I didn't. And sometimes God does work on a case by case basis, right? Some commandments are to everyone. Others, are individual. Um, and so I was like, oh, I didn't ask about that. And they're like, I think maybe it's just about time that both of you are free from the trauma and the pain. She hasn't had a moment, like almost any moments of pain free since she was born. I think it's about time she was pain free, right? I'm like, bitter pill to swallow in the moment. But so, months later, I'm asking myself, did I make the right choice? And I was sitting out in my parents' living room before anyone else was up that morning, in front of the tree. I was reading on my phone an article by one of the church magazines. I think it was the youth magazine. I forget which one. Anyways, there's a story of this little girl who was a part of a Christmas pageant, and the youth leaders for this pageant had miscounted the number of angel costumes for these little girls to come and wear. And one girl came and got her costume, and she saw another girl who didn't get hers because they miscounted, and her older sister was there with her and said, noticed the older little girl crying, and she looks, gets down and, to talk to her sister, and she goes, what the right thing to do here is, right? You need to give that little girl your costume. So look how sad she is. She needs a costume. You need to be selfless and give your costume to her. Reluctantly, yeah, you're right. She was very kind about it. Okay. Now, one of the youth leaders saw this and was like, that was very selfless of you. Wow, that was so kind. How about this? How would you like, and I'll tell you why I'm getting emotional in a second, but she said, how would you like to hold up the star for all to see when the angels come in? They were going to like put it up on like a fishing line or something. And she goes, how would you like to hold the star? And in that moment, the Holy Ghost said the best two words I ever heard on any Christmas before or since. He told me, worthy sacrifice. And my heart could rest. And I knew that it really was a mercy letting Lorraine go when she did. It was a relief for her being pain free for the first time in pretty much the first time in 48 years. It was an instant chance for me to displace my addiction with the connections that I didn't have the chance to develop over those last 10 years because I was constantly stressed about her health. So like the addiction almost evaporated because I could go make healthy connections now with people. And it just, all the desire for it just was gone. Um, so really, her death unlocked something, a part of me that I didn't know until then existed. And God was spending those 10 years helping me understand the kind of person I could actually be. Because, then after all that weight's taken off of me, it was like you can just hit the ground running. And my dad used that phrase when I came back to the States. He's like, people asking, oh, how, talking to him, oh, how's Paul doing? Is he okay? And I remember people telling me, your dad is shocked. He can't believe what you're doing. Like, he just tells, she just hit the ground running. I don't know how he's doing it. I'm like, it's him.
Mm-hmm.
He strengthened me with all that crap for 10 years so that the release of that stress, at the very beginning of this interview, and I told you, I told Colette multiple times when when we were first dating, sometime after when I got back to the States, first dating, and I was, that's the reason I kept telling her, oh, don't worry about it when you apologize for something. I have seen worse, far worse. This is nothing compared to what I've seen in my life. You can just fly. you know? And that's because I partnered with the Savior and because I realized that I was being proven and I wanted to be the kind of person that could say, I have been proven and I'm never going to leave the side of my Savior ever again. Um, that's why I can do it, you know?
Yeah.
When you see it as an opportunity instead of, the world's just dumping on me, well, maybe it is too, but you can make it an opportunity to prove yourself, show what kind of person you really are. Are you the kind of person that when you're given power, you abuse it, or do you use it to help the weak and the self and the I don't know what the word I was going to use there, but when something bad happens, do you choose anger? New Testament where Paul says, "Can a man be angry and not sin?" The implied answer is no. Um, what kind of person are you going to be when trials come up? Are you going to let it beat you? Or are you going to let it bring out the best in you? Are you going to let the Savior make you a better person through it? Satan gives you one vote, God gives you another vote. You're the deciding vote.
Yeah.
There's a song I love called "War Inside" by Switchfoot, all-time favorite band. I'm a Switchfoot nerd, and the war inside it says, I am the war inside. I am the battle line. I am the rising tide. I am the war I fight. We are one of the other parts in the song where it says, we are the kids of the in between. It's in the air. It's in our blood. It's in part of the lyrics say, every seed that turns into a tree, every plant, everything we do is about deciding whose side we're on. Are we going to choose anger? Are we going to choose peace? Are we going to choose, you know, giving into the natural man? Or are we going to choose the Lord's proving us? Um, Regardless of whether we're listening to our own conscience or our own wills or our own, mortal inclinations or someone else. Maybe it's an advertisement. Maybe it's a friend of yours. Maybe it's a relative. Maybe it's a politician, a commercial. Whatever you're listening to and obeying, you're obeying something or someone either way. So why not obey the one person who can and wants to give you and make you into something nobody else can? Either way, you're obeying somebody,
Hmm.
yourself, commercial, whatever. Why not make it the person who can break you out of the garbage and turn you into something better? The only person who actually can.
Yeah. Amen. Very good, Paul. Thank you so much. I got one last question for you as we wrap this.
Yeah.
What does the other side of addiction mean to you?
The other side of addiction to me is more than just sobriety. Johann Hari in his TED Talk said the opposite of addiction is not just sobriety, it's connection, which I alluded to earlier.
Mhm.
Um, you have one actor on the stage of your mind at a time. And if you are not putting something better into your life to displace the dark actors on your stage with something else, they're going to come right back. You know, the other side of addiction to me is not just being sober from your addiction, but going the extra mile to like I try to do today. Still, help other people with it. Speak out against and I don't want to tell anybody to be anti stuff. Don't be like a fanatic or anything. There is a fanatical level that's unhealthy, of course, but fight the new drug. There's a reason they call themselves a nonprofit, non-religious, non-legislative organization because they're not an alarmist organization, but they go out of their way at least to make sure other people know how to break out. They go beyond just, oh, good, great, good, you're free, go live your life now. No, no, no. This is something we have to fight because if you don't, somehow, sometime or other, it's going to affect, even if indirectly, you or someone else you love sometime down the road. You have to make it a part of your life to fight against whatever used to drag you down,
Yeah.
Um, I still have connections in my brain. Like with pornography addiction, it's not like drugs or alcohol where you can physically detox and change your friends and never go to the bar or never go to the drug dealers again. It's everywhere. Facebook is saturated with softcore porn. It's in the movies. It's on the radio, in the lyrics. You have to constantly be fighting against it. The connections in my brain, that were, misstructured during those addictive years, it takes at least as much time to heal those neural pathways as it does to form them. So I still have addictive thought patterns that Satan tries to use against me. I still have the problem. I'm not completely healed. I'm complete. The habit's gone completely, but the mental thing is still there. I have to keep fighting.
Mhm.
Alex Boye once said, "I can't watch HBO. Other people can. I can't because I have to keep fighting it." You know. So that's the other side to me is continuing to advocate.
Thank you. Paul, thank you for coming on the show, being vulnerable, sharing your journey, your story. And I could see, it was hard for you to even share the story about your late wife. I couldn't imagine going through anything like that. So again, thank you for, stepping forward and using your voice. I mean, you've said it a few times during the show, using our voice is very powerful, especially for those who may be going through it right now, because someone could be going through the exact same thing that you went through. And hearing your story could help them get through whatever they need to get through at this time. So thank you so much.
No worries. Happy to be on here. Happy to help.
Thank you. Well, guys, again, thank you to all our past guests, all our new guests, our past sponsors. Thank you to all you listeners. You guys are the ones that's making all this possible. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Um, Love and appreciate all you guys. And remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.